Juras-Sick Park-Cast, the Jurassic Park podcast where guests chat with me about Michael Crichton's 1990 novel Jurassic Park, and also Not That Too. I'm Ryan Rogers, and also a big dumb Jurassic Park fan. Welcome to episode 8, The Shore of the Inland Sea, recorded here while the boys are at karate on April 4th, 2022. Thanks for joining me today. You're listening to Snail's Grow Old or Don't, and the outro today is Centipede. And thanks again to Snail and Christoph Oakes for the use of his rockin' music and shredding guitar solos. You can find his album on Spotify and Bandcamp, and it's spelled S-N-A-L-E. I have some corrections today. First off, Shaq did, in fact, score a three-pointer, but just one. But that's all it took for me to be totally wrong about that, so apologies to Shaq. I love the Icy Hot commercials. Apparently, Dr. Seuss's name rhymes with voice, as in soice. I guess we were all wrong about that one, but I think we'll sweep that one under the rug. And despite what I think, no. I don't know the actual difference between a metric ton and an imperial ton. Yes, they're spelt different, and sure, I could look it up, but no. Like, why are they both large measurements of weight pronounced the same way but spelled different and in technically different sizes? Like, quit pissing me off. In dinosaur news, we have ankylosaur craniums. A new ankylosaur paper from Frontiers in Earth Science called New Ankylosaurian Cranial Remains from the Lower Cretaceous Tullabuck Formation of Queensland, Australia, has referred some new cranial elements to the species Kunbarasaurus. The new specimen SAMAP40536, housed at the South Australian Museum of Adelaide, was uncovered from the Tullabuck Formation. It's comprised of a partial skull, incorporating impressions of the left and right maxillae and bits of skull, as well as both maxillary tooth rows and 8 isolated teeth. Postcranial elements include parts of the pelvis, limb elements, vertebrae, ribs, scutes, and numerous dermal ossicles. But those are still encased in limestone and haven't been prepared or described yet. The specimen has been referred to Kunbarasaurus iveresi, which is known from the holotype QMF1801, housed at the Queensland Museum, which was excavated from the Alaru Formation and is comprised of an almost complete skeleton with skull, containing the vertebral column, the left shoulder girdle, and left arm, minus the hand, the pelvis, both thigh bones, and most of the body armor. The early Cretaceous herbivore was discovered in 1989 and named in 2015, and it's believed to have been about 10 feet long. Similarities in the palate and dentary led the authors to refer the specimen to the existing Kunbarasaurus species, but more research is necessary once the remainder of the specimen is prepared. And once prepared, it's expected these remains will, quote, elucidate its taxonomic affinities, further testing the phylogenetic affinities of Australian and Gondwanan ankylosaurs, says the paper. Also, the shape of the palate has uncovered a new phylogenetic characteristic, which can serve usefully in further resolving ankylosaur phylogenetic relationships. Meaning, parts of its mouth are distinctive and will help identify if and how it's related to other ankylosaurs by the virtue of its distinctive mouth parts. So, the authors have channeled their inner deliverance and can't help but remarking, he's got a real pretty mouth, ain't he? The palate's features, quote, differ from the more anterior placement seen in most other ankylosaurians, which is shared with Kunbarasaurus, Acanocephalus, Cedar-pelta, Gobisaurus, and Panoplosaurus. The skull also represents the, quote, oldest ankylosaurian material from Queensland, predating the holotype of Kunbarasaurus. With this new diagnostic feature in mind, phylogenetic analyses placed the new cranial material in a new basal ankylosaurian clade, Parankylosauria, which I guess predates more formally recognized ankylosaurians later found in the Cretaceous era. I have another paper, Jadocta Family Units. This one's actually from November 15th, 1979. And that's right, this news item was first reported in 1979, and it specifically connects with this week's chapter. So it's not new news, but it's relevant. It's called Nest of Juveniles Provides Evidence of Family Structure Among Dinosaurs. One of the greatest mysteries associated with dinosaurs is the rarity of juveniles. With the notable exception of the Jadocta and Irandabasu formations in Mongolia and the Two Medicine Formation of Montana, skeletal elements of very young dinosaurs are exceedingly uncommon, leaving a gap in the understanding of dinosaur social structures. The most popular explanation, based chiefly on negative evidence, is that the eggs and young were kept in the uplands where they were rarely covered by sediments and as a result were destroyed by erosion. The discovery of 15 1-meter-long hadrosaurian duck-billed skeletons together in a nest-like structure offers the first tangible evidence of the social behavior of at least one group of dinosaurs. They were discovered by Marion Brandvold in terrestrial sediments of the Two Medicine Formation, which is in the Upper Cretaceous near Chateau, Teton County, Montana. The skulls of the referred juvenile specimens have short, wide-deflected premaxillary bills, long, shallow maxillae with interior maxillary processes and notches, and long, thin, steeply angling quadratojugal processes of the jugals. Whatever that means. In all these characters, they agree with the adult specimens. So these infants, or these youngsters, look like adult specimens. The juvenile skull elements are, however, disarticulated and in many instances crushed so that positive identification cannot be made. But since then, we know that all of this has been made into the Maiasaura genus. And so that's been very interesting. That was the first description by Jack Horner of Maiasaura. Now, please stay tuned for my wonderful interview. You're going to love it. So joining me today on the podcast is Justin Kiley. He's the host of the Missing Compys Podcast that you can find on the internet. It's been running since 2017. It's got over 150 episodes, if you can believe it. Justin and I met at a community hall in Miramichi, New Brunswick, where they double booked one night. And so we got to take part in a remembrance mass for the deeds of Mother Teresa. And then we got to stay on for their burlesque all-male review, which were both rewarding enterprises in their own ways. So, Justin, was there a highlight from that double feature that stands out in your memory?
I mean, I think the guy dressed as a Christmas tree, but I could be very wrong. I gotta be honest, you warned me you were gonna do a joke at the beginning. I was not prepared mentally for that image. Wow.
I think that the tribute to the tribute to Mother Teresa was very colorful as well. I thought.
Yes, yeah. I wasn't expecting any of that.
He was feeding the hungry.
That's great.
All right. So, the Missing Compys Podcast, for real, is a real thing. And it's filled with plenty of discussion on Jurassic Park, and it goes over many of the films and other films. It goes over multiple drafts of the scripts and shows that you might like too. So there's, like I said, all kinds of stuff on there. And obviously, you're anticipating Jurassic World Dominion coming up, and you're covering Camp Cretaceous. I don't know. What else have you got coming up for subscribers when you get some time to return to podcasting?
No, we got some stuff coming up. Dominion, obviously, is the big thing on the horizon. I think everyone in the fandom is pretty excited about it. I've been very happy with everything I've seen. I think the new stuff that just came out about some of the animatronic dinosaurs they created. I think they said there's going to be something like 38 species in this film. So, I mean, it's really the Avengers of Jurassic. Which I can't believe I get to say that, but I'm really excited, and that's the big one. So obviously we'll be covering the toys, and I think our next recording we're probably going to talk all about those animatronics because there are some really cool things that we're in that article. So stuff like that. Camp Cretaceous season 5, I know it's confirmed to be coming. I want to say in summer, so we're going to cover that. I'm going to begrudgingly get my co-host to work their way through it. It's a challenge. I'm one of the very few positive ones on my own podcast for that show. So it's always a little bit of a pulling teeth thing to get through it, but we're going to keep going. And then kind of going back and forth on a couple other ideas. Mm-hmm. Like you said, we covered Jurassic, but I have other interests besides Jurassic. I started the podcast as kind of a catch-all for monster films because my dad and me, we really bonded when I was younger over our love of monster movies. Mm-hmm. He showed me Jurassic Park and Aliens, and I love monsters. I always have. So kind of in that vein, I think we're going to be covering Prey, which will be on Hulu this summer. That's the new Predator film.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to see a trailer for that actually really, really bad. That's next to Jurassic. That's my number one for this summer. And then there's also the Alien TV series, whenever the hell that drops. I think that's rumored for 2024. So if the podcast is still running, we'll be covering that. But yeah, we have a lot coming. Yeah, just like I tell everybody that listens to my show, just bear with me. I do it as a hobby. I work a lot of hours. It's tricky sometimes to get the episodes up. We try to get 2 out a month, and it's always great to have people listen to, right?
I was going to say, in 2017, you launched it. Was it inspired by, I guess, Jurassic Park kind of coming back at that time?
Yeah, A little bit, actually. Okay, so this is a huge tangent, but
Sure.
and
All right.
I apologize. It started because I had seen Jurassic World. Obviously, that came out in 2015. I was really impressed with what Colin did with that film. He brought back a dead franchise because Jurassic was dead and buried at that point, and it was just amazing to me to see something that I loved growing up come back and make a shit ton of money. And so it was just excited. I was so excited, but I kept seeing people in the fandom and on websites complaining about how it wasn't Jurassic Park-y enough. And I read the book. I read that book like twice a year. I listen to the audio book. So I mean, I know the book backwards and forwards, and I was like, I don't understand where you guys are coming from.
Yeah.
It just made me mad, honestly. It was just it just annoyed me. It annoyed me that there's a couple podcasts. Jurassic Park-Cast is probably the big one, hosted by Brad Jost, and I was listening to him, and he doesn't have the book knowledge, really. I think he'd be the first to say. I just wanted a podcast that talked about how Jurassic World actually was doing right by Crichton,
right,
and bringing up stuff that, the first set of films really didn't do a very good job with a lot of the things that Crichton was kind of worried about. And Fallen Kingdom actually kind of proved me even more right, because I think Fallen Kingdom is the most Crichton-y of the entire set of films so far. So, But yeah, it all stemmed from that. I was an angry person with a laptop and a microphone, and decided I'd get out there and see if anyone else felt the way I did, and I did find some people.
You make an excellent point, and I've been wrestling with it because I don't like it, and it's that the militarization or the weaponization of dinosaurs really, really bugged me. I've always felt like the future of military strikes is just going to be in drone warfare, and that you would never send anything in anywhere. You just shoot from above from a remote control. But you're right. When you make a point, the whole beginning of the book is all about how biotechnology is being developed in a myriad of different ways under no supervision, and any dumb idea is fair game. Anyone, because as long as somebody's got the money to do it, anything can happen. And so, I don't want to say that makes dumb ideas okay, but it makes it entirely realistic. And so whether I like it or not, it's like, oh, I can't believe somebody, and I guess that makes them even a better villain. Like, I hate what you're doing, and I can't wait for a dinosaur to kick you. And I think that makes it.
Yeah.
There you go. And you make it was the biggest problem I have with especially the second one. The Fallen Kingdom.
Yeah.
But it is entirely in line. You're absolutely correct. When they look at the source material and they refer to the source text and say, what can we do with this? And stick to what makes it a Jurassic Park, part of the intellectual property. That's it. And it's right in line with doing something just disgusting with biotechnology is exactly what the book warns about. The first book was a fantasy on what is one way that could happen. And so you make an excellent point, and you made it better than pretty much anybody else I've heard. So I'm convinced, anyhow, that it makes sense for the film.
Well, that's good.
And I think even better if you don't like it, because then when they do get their comeuppance, it feels better.
No, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Like, there's definitely a part of this is ridiculous, like military dinosaurs. Like, who would do that? Like, no military's really gonna buy a bunch of velociraptors and throw them up against a tank. It just doesn't actually make any sense. But that's what the characters like Hoskins and Eli Mills, to a degree, that's what they think and what they're trying to do. But to me, it's just more of like you said, it's the idea of this. You have this incredible technology, you have the ability to bring back animals from millions of years ago, and once the park is up and running, it's not like that stops. The technology wouldn't just stay there, and that was what Crichton really was kind of worried about, and the book really drives home, is this idea of characters like Dodgson, like Biosyn, which is finally going to be in the films now, and Dominion. But Biosyn's whole idea, in fact, in the book, I think he even has a line about maybe not militarized, but he's definitely got, it's a very Dodgson plan, and it just fits. Like, Eli Mills might as well be Dodgson, except, if Dodgson was more into the idea of the auction. But yeah, I mean, again, in like Fallen Kingdom too, there's definitely a small environmental message. I think in a lot of Crichton's earlier work. I mean, there's lines in the book that kind of comment on deforestation, things like that.
Yeah.
And Fallen Kingdom is very clear allegory to things that we do in the real world. The black market for animal trade is a very evil and disgusting thing, and people sell tigers to Colombian drug lords. So again, if you have this technology, you have these dinosaurs, absolutely would there be a black market where some drug lord's going to have a pack of raptors? It's only dumb or out of the realm if you don't put yourself in the world a film has created, and that's, I think people forget or just like to pull these movies apart and not really think about, again, the source material, but also the world that the films inhabit is not our own world. This is a world that has technology that is beyond our current capabilities, and you should take all that stuff into account. Plus, they're just fun movies. People are too serious nowadays. I don't understand it. Why can't people just go to a movie? I'm a dinosaur guy. I love seeing dinosaurs. I don't care if they're scientifically accurate. I'm a creature guy. Give me an animal ripping a guy's arm off. Give me, a T-Rex and a Carnotaurus literally ripping Eli Mills into like 6 different pieces, and then his body gets eaten by compies. Awesome death. Best death in the whole franchise is Eli Mills. He gets royally screwed. And yeah, no, there you go. There it is.
For sure. And I think your point about the environmental focus that emerges in the book, I know that Grant mentions that he has been a consultant, I think, a couple times. There's one line about him being a consultant. So when the EPA comes to investigate, he's like, maybe they're coming to ask about the environment. And I guess he would be, an expert on paleo environments and perhaps past extinctions, which comes up a lot in paleontology now. People talking about past extinctions and how that may inform a present extinction. And how environmental change was a big part of, I think they say there's 5 major extinctions, but when they talk about the dinosaur ones anyhow, I believe that they go on like about, hey, serious environmental changes were at the forefront of each of these major extinction events. So that's a good point. And then it comes up in the book quite often how, especially in the very beginning, that bioengineering can change the face of the earth literally, that it may impact vegetation, it may impact environments, it may affect all these different things. And so the consequences are dire if in the wrong hands, and then it moves forward. So there's one part, I think they're talking about the rights of an animal that doesn't exist yet. And that certainly ties into this environmental issue that I don't know where, like, for real, Michael Crichton sat on the whole fence. I think he was like dubious of a lot of the science either way, because his state of fear really was kind of state of fear was
weird when he got later.
Well, I think he just read too much of all the different sides and could never come to a consensus. I think he found
his own conclusion.
When you look too close at everything falls apart. Because they don't have the answer. Point. They just have the best answer so far. And I think he can, they all have a little hiccup in them until it's perfect. I got to know, how did you come up with the name The Missing Compys for your podcast? Because I listened to a couple of them. I haven't quite figured it out, but I could guess. But
okay, no,
get it from the horse's mouth, yeah.
Let's see. So the name, that's kind of, again, that came from a place of anger. If I'm honest, it's kind of dumb, but I don't know. I suppose it's funny. It actually came from the idea of comparison because, again, I really wanted to compare the new films to the book. If you go way back to our early episodes, which are pretty rough, and we redid a lot of that stuff, so I wouldn't even go back to the first, 20 episodes. They were rough. But, I wanted to stick with the Crichton, how the Jurassic World film, at that time it was only the first, movie, was actually a better Jurassic Park than Jurassic Park. As far as doing Crichton, I think, right. Not necessarily. I think both Jurassic Park and Jurassic World are my favorite, 2 of my favorite movies of all time. I love them both dearly. I don't like doing the which film is better bullshit that everybody loves to do, or all of a sequel is better than. It's not for me. But so the Missing Compys. So I thought about just calling it the Missing Comparisons, and my wife actually was the one that was like, well, isn't there the little green thing from the Lost World? I was like, oh yeah, Compy. She's like, well, there you go, the Missing Compy. And then it actually worked even better because one of the things that I love from the book, but that wasn't in the any of the movies. It's like one of my favorite scenes, actually, almost of any book. I love how horrifying it is. But in the book, one of the first things that happens is a baby gets eviscerated by compies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of was like, okay, so not only are people missing the point, but where are the compies? They're not in Jurassic Park in the film. So yeah, it worked on a couple different levels. But yes, that's my whole sad story for the game.
Yes, the baby in the bassinet, and we just covered that in the last episode, I think, because that's the end of the first act, and then you segue into meeting Alan Grant for the first time. But yes, that's exactly where we are in the book. And what's beautiful about that baby in the bassinet is when Hammond is dying at the hands of the compies at the end of the book, it says that he falls asleep like a baby in a crib or something like that. And it bookends the horrors that happened to that baby at the beginning, and the compies kind of dole out that just. I don't know. There's something about the connectivity between Hammond dying and falling asleep like a baby in a crib that compares to the baby getting eaten in the bassinet. That is beautiful because Crichton doesn't have a lot of that connectivity or that metaphor or that overarching motif, really. Like, he's got themes, but he doesn't really use metaphor or simile especially well. But that's one that just touches you because, you know, babies getting eaten, like having their faces eaten off by carnivores, little pecks. That's disturbing. Like, period.
It's great.
And
it's so good.
Yeah. So the missing copy, yeah. And then, I mean, I guess they're still in Costa Rica. I would suppose that they're still there at the end of the novel. They did not get napalmed, so it should be all right.
Yeah. I mean, well, the raptors are out too. That's kind of the thing that book leads off with. It's it's like the tug that was never pulled. I was actually really surprised that before he wrote The Lost World, I kind of figured if they did a sequel to the film, it would have been, there's raptors running around Costa Rica. Because the book does leave off that way. And it's, even the Lost World book doesn't, kind of a plot hole. Because it's never really mentioned again. So it's a little weird, actually, now that I think about it. Because it's completely left. I think a lot of people don't even remember it because it's like 2 sentences at the very end of the book, but it's heavily implied that the raptors are running around and compies.
They make it certainly some reports of some mysterious animals are running around. I don't know if you can conclude, like, I don't know that they describe it specifically enough to confirm the raptors, but there's definitely something running around, and they say that they're following. I don't know. They make some explanation for why they're not dropping dead from the lysine contingency. And
they're eating corn.
Yeah.
In the book, I believe.
So I don't know if that's a raptor thing or if that's and the Aussies get off or what gets off, but it could be the raptors. Why not?
The reason I said raptors is because of the whole plot line of the raptors on the boat. And I just figure if those raptors got on a boat, then to me it would make logical sense that earlier, because the park's being built, 4 years? So, I mean, just kind of made sense to me that, well, those are probably like, there's probably been multiple raptor exoduses going to they would have been Costa Rica, but yeah, still.
They would have only been mature enough. Like, well, I guess you can escape when you're an infant.
Oh yeah, a little baby raptor could get on there. I mean, we don't really know how many batches of raptors there were either.
It's hard to say.
I mean,
what I do, so I built a timeline, and it's fairly robust about all the references to dates and times and years and things like that from the novel. And when I look at it, we're told, where do we have here? Hammond begins his 2-year fundraising campaign on the pachyderm portfolio. On page 59, it tells us we can do the math, and it says that it's around 1983 that he begins the funding. It's 2 years. By 1985, he concludes that, and that's when he begins construction, or something like that. Maybe 86 he begins construction. But Grant is receiving phone calls from Gennaro about how to feed a juvenile hadrosaur in the middle of the night, and so he discontinues that in 1985. So he was already getting calls about juvenile species a year and a little bit before the island construction began. So it argues that there is an off-site lab that is doing some of this work. So they may never have actually had to escape an island to make it to the mainland. A. B. It also lends credence to the Lost World phenomenon where they have 5 islands that they could all be existing on. But that was, I guess, not in Crichton's imagination at the time. Maybe it was. There was no reference to other islands in the novel. But this timeline does argue that there was some time where, like before construction on the island, that the dinosaurs were being experimented with. So that's it. And that would make sense. You would like proof of concept that you can actually raise a dinosaur before you go and lease the island, right? So,
yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. I thought that timeline really unfolds in an interesting way. It could certainly make a case that it's stand to reason there might be lizards or unknown animals running around still.
No, actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, and weirdly, it almost makes I wonder if Colin did some math and figured that out too, because Fallen Kingdom has the facility that Lockwood is in is where it all started. Eli Mills says, before the islands, before everything, that they were working out of this house laboratory. That's why it was able to house the dinosaurs. That that was kind of where I think Colin said in interviews, that was where the baby elephant was cloned and stuff. So
right.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be within the fiction. It's in California, so it's not an island. It's on the, it's in the States. So that's makes me wonder if maybe Colin, I don't know if he would have gone to that level though, but it does kind of fit.
Would you have liked Lockwood to have been William Atherton?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. You probably haven't listened to an episode. I did a whole.
Oh, did I miss it? Okay.
Because I did an episode because when the first trailers started, information on the plot came out.
Yeah.
And it was okay. So it's John Hammond's business partner that we haven't heard anything about, and in any of the films. And I was just kind of like, well, okay. So I wonder, because I don't mind a retcon, especially with this, because Hammond is like he's in the movie obviously, but like he's not the focus, and like you don't know much about John Hammond in the film. The book there's a lot more backstory, but like the film it's just kind of this happy-go-lucky Walt Disney guy that made this great park, and he's very. And I love the performance. Like Antenberg, Hammond is iconic. It's an incredible performance, but it's not the book Hammond, and I've said a lot. I prefer the book Hammond because I liked how he was this nice old guy, but not really. He was a ruthless person dressed as this very jovial grandpa. But anyways, the Atherton thing. When they said it, he was going to have a partner, and it was this Lockwood, and that he, worked with him to help develop the technology and everything. I was like, so they're bringing in Atherton. They just renamed him. Mm-hmm. So I do think that Colin pulled that. It's too similar not to be, and it's nice because in the book that is a thing, and obviously in the book Atherton dies, and Lew is the one that takes over. But I mean, you don't have to have him. Again, the character is functionally the same, and actually, what they did in the film, I thought was, I guess spoilers for Fallen Kingdom. Fallen Kingdom finally did the thing that I can't believe it took them 5 films to even bring up, which is, if you can clone long extinct animals, why don't you clone a person? Like, why wouldn't that be kind of the inevitable? Again, the genie's out of the bottle, as Ian Malcolm says, and why wouldn't that be a very next step? And I love the fact that in this backstory of the films now, you have if you watch Jurassic Park now, you can think about the fact that Lockwood was kind of the start of this, and that Hammond is actually far more. He's almost more moral. It actually makes him even more almost saintly because he splits up with Lockwood because he's like, well, you cloned your dead daughter, and I don't like that, okay, and. I tell you, if in my fanfic there is maybe an HBO or I guess a Peacock streaming show, it's John Hammond and Lockwood before Jurassic Park, raising the money, cloning the elephant with the original Maisie, and it ends with her death and then the cloning.
Oh, neat.
And that I still think, if Universal's not listening, but come on, somebody write a book that is such fertile ground. You can, the ethics of that are so murky. And and I always said now, and so there's a line in Fallen Kingdom that I really like because it's so ambiguous. But Lockwood and Maisie looks at a model of Jurassic Park. You get this, the little model. You get the iconic theme song. It's a nostalgia bait moment. But she asks if her mom was ever on the island.
Okay.
And Lockwood says yes, more or less. And I always thought, now what if, this is messed up, but what if one of the dinosaurs killed Maisie, right? So she dies on that island. And then Lockwood, in his grief, uses the technology to clone her. And then, and then Hammond, that's when the split happens. But I always thought, what if, we think in the film continuity, one of the first deaths is that worker or whatever. But what if it's so much darker than that? I just love that. I hope they do something with that. I don't think they're going to, but
well, the book.
I think that would fit the book really well. Sorry.
The book did say there were multiple deaths. I think there's one part. I'm just at a part where Gennaro is explaining to Daniel Cowan that Hammond is under pressure. We can't trust him. I don't believe him anymore. He says nothing's wrong, but we know the pressure's getting to him. There's been too many deaths is one of the lines. It literally says that. So it's obviously more than one guy. And so that could be part of it too. That because it was part of the opening sequence too, was that Bobby Carter was like, why is this guy so nervous when he brings the injured workman to the clinic?
Yeah.
She says, why is he so nervous? They're using unskilled labor. They should be getting serious injuries all the time. Which I was like, are you crazy? If a guy came in surely to die, I'd be like very nervous, and that would be very troublesome to me. But this element is like, oh no, I'm sure people are dying over there on this construction project left and right. So there's something to be said for it's not a safe working place, even just doing construction, let alone there being megafauna that is preying on people. But that's in there too. That's mentioned more than once in just the first 50 pages. That lots of people are dying on the island before any dinosaurs got out.
Yeah, well, and it's something that I think the book does a lot. Is the book is so much darker than any of the I would say the darkest film before Fallen Kingdom was probably The Lost World, and now I would argue it's Fallen Kingdom as far as its tone. It's a pretty dark film. You got murder, you got human cloning, this and that. Lost World, it was just Lost World's really not that dark, but the kills were definitely
sure.
I think more. I remember as a kid seeing the blood in the water and thinking, wow, that's pretty intense. But the book is far darker, not only with the graphic nature of the kills, but also the characters. And again, the idea that John Hammond is really, he's kind of a crazy person. He's like, when you think bad capitalism, and we've got plenty of that down here. We have way too much of it actually, but there's certain people in the world that remind me a lot of Hammond as far as, it's the type of person that I guess acceptable losses comes to mind. And Hammond definitely wasn't shedding any tears. But
to me,
I love that opening.
Yeah. To me, the Hammond, he comes across, he's a dreamer, and what he raised the money, he sold the dream, he recruited the personnel to make it work. And to me, he seems like the kind of guy that's like, now don't give me excuses, just get it done. And he doesn't suffer fools or anything like that. He doesn't want anything to do with it not working. Just make it work. I don't care what you have to do. That's your problem. It's not my problem. I gave you the money. I gave you the tools, the science. I gave you everything you need. Make it happen. When it comes to people who saying you can't do this, you can't do that, he gets mouthy. He gets rude. At the end, he's like, everybody I picked was wrong for this job. I should have done better with everyone. And then he dies because he's a terrible person. But the whole premise, the Hammond we get, if you're identifying Hammond with what's in the film, it's unfortunate because that Hammond at the end has his change of heart. There's the Grant story arc where he doesn't like kids and he likes kids. He's really grown as a character. And then Hammond has one line at the end, I'm not going to endorse your park. And he goes, what? So do I? Is that his line? So he's the other guy that has a change of heart.
He says it's over. Grant's after careful consideration, I've decided not to endorse your park, and he just kind of looks, says it's over, and then It's the gas.
So
Yeah, it's
there's the two characters that have an arc that change their mind over something, and that's it. But in the book, he gets to double down. Like, have you learned a lesson? Have you learned anything? No. I'm going to build three more parks. I'm going to build them bigger and better. I'm going to pick better people. I hate my grandkids. And then he it's not like, I guess it's hubris, but that's about it. He pays for his ambition. Yeah, so he actually forcibly is written to not accept any learning lessons, and that's interesting.
Yeah, he's kind of the man. Yeah, he's like the ultimate slam your head into a brick wall, back up, and then just do it harder. Like it's the ultimate double down of Yeah, you think after all the deaths and this park and all the trouble he's in, and then as he's about to, we don't, of course, as you're reading, you don't know he's gonna die like 2 pages on, but I do love that part where Jurassic Park Japan is opening up next year, and which, to be fair to like Hammond, it's kind of like I almost admire the fact that like after all of this he's like screw you, dude, I got all the power here.
Yeah,
we've already started work. That's one thing that the movie, again, like the movie can't do everything, so it's not like I don't understand why they didn't, but it is like a thing that really shows how forward thinking Hammond is, that like, no, it's not, because that's the reality too, is like, if you look at the way a lot of these theme parks go, they plan out, and they buy multiple plots of land, and they kind of build, they'll finish one, but they'll be working on the other one, and one of my biggest problems is there's no scope to Jurassic Park the film. Like there's one building, and that's like it. The whole park apparently is just this one building, and it's one of the things I think. And again, to go to Jurassic World, now granted, Jurassic World is an open park, but when I thought about Jurassic Park in my own imagination, I saw Jurassic World. I saw an actual theme park, and I think the first movie, it has this kind of intimate. Very much, an adventure feel, but it's so unbelievable. Like what the film is asking you to believe, taking the dinosaurs out of it, like the park makes zero sense. None of it works.
And for a guy that wrote Westworld, right? Westworld was about a theme park, and for a guy that wrote about Westworld, it doesn't make sense that he hasn't conceived the hotel. Like you hear about the Triceratops Lodge. And that's pretty much the only other facility that you hear about. And then they can't even work on it because they went and put wild animals on it instead before they finished construction.
That's true.
But you don't get you don't really get a sense of any other facilities. And that doesn't make a lick of sense because it's going to be presumably hosting thousands of people at the same time, right? I'm not sure what... That you're right. The world building is absent of like the revenue function of what this whole thing's about. And... obviously, they didn't earn any revenues at Jurassic Park, but that's the whole design. You go into business for the profitable income, and you're right, that piece of it is entirely missing, and that's the crux of going into business. So I can relate, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, does it? What? Maybe that's not... that would be on the tour too. That's the whole point. Especially if you're trying to impress investors with Gennaro. You want to say, hey, investors, this is where the money comes in.
I will say, like, to the book's defense... This is really a film, like a main film problem, because at least in the novel, like there is the lodge, which is where Grant, Ellie, and all of them stay. That's described as a hotel. Now, Crichton isn't a very, like the world building isn't great with like the actual building part. Like it's there's a lot of room for interpretation, but he mentions like tennis courts, swimming pool.
Yep, swimming pools.
The lodge. I always took it in my imagination as like that must have been a fairly large hotel, and and then you got the treetop and the aviary. He mentions the restaurant that is gonna open up or whatever down the line. So there's stuff in the book that at least feels like okay, so there's something here. So when it opens up, like it's gonna actually function. It's just the film is such a kind of ridiculous. Like
I have a list.
I just love that it's one building.
I have a list here of what's in here. Yeah, it's one building. We got the visitor arrivals. That's one center. Visitor center / administration. That's where the tour happens. Power desalinization and support, which I guess would be a shed, and then Hammond residence. And beyond that, there's Safari
The
Lodge.
bungalow.
So that's those are like the 5 facilities that are named in the section on plans. And then the rest of it is
schematics. I love that chapter.
That's a good chapter.
Yeah.
That's a good chapter. That's when I'm coming up to as well.
So the plot thickens.
Yeah, what's all this? And there's so many neat parts of it. I got a 30-minute ramble on that one that comes out in a couple weeks. So, speaking of not having William Atherton into the film, what would you have thought if instead of Zara they had used an Ed Regis in Jurassic World?
Yeah, that would have been interesting. Now, Ed Regis was the publicist of Jurassic Park, a character that was in a lot of the early scripts, and then eventually was combined with
all the great lines from Hammond
to a degree
were said by Ed Regis. All the great lines that Hammond gets in the film that you like. You see, it's sort of a ride is one. Yeah, we spared no expenses one.
I know the ride one.
Welcome to Jurassic Park was Ed Regis too. Welcome to Jurassic Park was him. All the good lines got to Hammond, and when they cut him out.
That's because Hammond isn't really like Hammond from the book. He's really. Yeah. I don't think he even has. I mean, he's got a couple lines from Hammond. There are some lines. The one where he talks about, the most advanced amusement park in the world is straight out of the book. Like, they gave him a couple little zingers. But yeah, you're right. Ed Regis had some of the best lines because he was the publicist. That only made sense. I mean, in the book, it's. That part of the book's actually much more believable in that Hammond is really like, okay, they're your problem. Go take them around the park. It's like, why would Hammond? Yeah, and one of the other things in the book is Hammond is never on the island. There's a great thing where I like that Crichton does that because like you said, it's like Hammond gets it all together and then he's kind of just like, all right. Go build me my park and I'll. Yeah. He's really your typical manager, really. He's your typical GM. Knows nothing about anything of what's going on. Right. The perfect, useless manager, and then just screams at people to fix things, and that's not what they did in the film. But as far as Regis showing up in Jurassic World, I mean, if they had named a character Regis, that would have been kind of a fun callback, I suppose.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm a little biased though. Because I like Zara's death so much that I just...
He could have died that way, too.
Give up Zara.
Ed could have been... I don't know, what's a girl's name that's Edward? It could have been a lady named Regis. It's okay.
I'm not entirely sure. Edwina.
Yeah, maybe. Edwina Regis. I don't mind.
That's a real name.
Still feed him for her to a mosasaur. Yeah. You know what, too?
Against it. I mean, it would have been fun.
As well, Hammond tells Regis... You watch my grandkids like a hawk, and isn't that what Claire Dearing says to Zara? Watch these kids; they're your responsibility. She gives them the same rules. It's interesting. I'm trying to think if Zara was a publicist as well. She was a social media marketer or something like that. Or what was she? I don't remember.
Yeah, I think so. Well, they don't really say what she is, but you're probably right. She strikes me as. I don't know if it's either she was like the social media person or she was just Claire's secretary. I think.
The gopher, yeah.
No, actually, yeah, she is. She's the secretary because Claire's sister calls her to bitch her out. She's like, you left my kids with your secretary. So yeah, no, she's just go get the coffee girl and gets to die for that. But yeah, her death scene is like one of my all-time favorite. Just I love it so much.
Yeah, it's pretty intense, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I remember when that happened, people were crying about that. Oh, she didn't deserve to die. I'm like, that nobody deserves. Well, no, it's not true. But people that don't deserve to die every day. Like what a stupid criticism. I'm sorry, I'm gonna start my rant about stupid film criticisms, but just it's one of those things. You hear this with I don't know if it's just the young kids now or the critics have all lost their minds, but. One of my favorite things now, it's like such a trope, is, this character didn't deserve this fate. And it's like, that's not the point, In real life, bad people don't die. A lot of times good people die. Terrible people are still alive. I know people that almost died of COVID, but, there's a certain ex-president that got COVID and still is running around. So, unfortunately, the reality is that death isn't fair, neither is life. And I don't know. All this to say, I love Zara just getting eaten twice. But pretty wild stuff. I got to give Colin a credit for that kill.
Yeah, and that movie, you're right. It envisioned an active park in a brilliant way. It was really fascinating. To me, the moment where you have the cameras on the raptors' heads rushing through the jungle, and you can see them on the display monitors at the same time. That part to me was like my imagination as a kid, just thrust at me, and I didn't even know I was going to get it. And it was that part to me blew me away. I was never more happy than just, I guess, being a raptor about as close as you could possibly be, just for that, I don't know, 20 seconds that it was. I thought that was the best part. Like, and Colin did all that. I mean, he made some incredible decisions in that film. It was really had some remarkable moments, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, no, I think of all the films, like the last two films have some really, just both of them, some real cool, really good set pieces. That's the thing with modern technology. You can dream it, you can do it now, and I think it's kind of a testament to both the direction of Colin and also the direction of J.A. Bayona, because there's shots in Fallen Kingdom that are just glorious from a cinematography standpoint. I'm very curious. Dominion so far looks like he's taken some cues from what Bayona did as far as the cinematography, which I think is really good, because I really like the dark cinematography of Fallen Kingdom, and I was hoping that we wouldn't completely lose that, and it looks like we're still kind of keeping that. So, yeah, I'm excited, man. I can't wait. Dominion is hopefully it's going to be really good. I'm really, really jazzed by everything I've seen. And Biosyn, so finally getting the big bad back. And I'm curious if there'll be any, I don't know how much retconning they're going to do, but I'm kind of curious. I've been on the record saying I think the film opens up with a flashback, and it's going to be Biosyn like 15 years ago. I don't know, doing something they shouldn't be. Maybe on Sorna. Because I fully expect a retcon with Biosyn. They have to. They have to do something.
They have to explain who they are. It's been too many years since they've been at it. Like, you need some like previously on Jurassic Park moment to at least catch you up to speed on who these guys are. Because I have heard, like, I've not looked too closely into Dominion. I feel like I'd just be disappointed if I know too much about it for whatever reason. So I try to lay low on and just let it surprise me when it happens, instead of. Because I'd hate to like prejudge something because I don't like the sounds of what you hear, like the rumors you hear. So.
Oh yeah.
Because maybe it exists, maybe it doesn't. I just don't want to. I don't want to have worried about it and overthought it before we get there. So I'm trying to stay clean of that. But I love the fact, and I was just coming to this conclusion recently, that with this new installment of Jurassic World, that they were able to build an extension to the franchise that has an overarching trilogy in mind, that it's, like if you watch Fallen Kingdom, you see that sort of resort, or that whatever the little thing is that they were talking about at the beginning of that film. They have some sort of oasis, or I forget what they call it, and you see it at the beginning of the film.
The sanctuary, I believe.
Sanctuary, thank you.
Yeah.
And we know that that's going to be an element of the final film. So this is all moving towards that end, and so they've got this arc. I like that this can tell a continuing story while a variety of adventures along the way, and show us lots and lots of stuff and have lots of adventure. I think that's terrific. In that, compare that to our first, second, and third Jurassic Parks that had, their problems were in their continuity. Their problems were in their, why are we even here? The problems are in, like, why are people still going to the islands at all? Like, that they felt so contrived. Like, I was just paragliding and I wound up there.
Actually, as dumb as that is, though, I will still stand by the third movie, because at least with that one, it was an accident, and I could get on board with how the third movie is hilarious. But no, I agree with you. Well, apparently, that film is like, Jurassic Park 3 is like Alien 3, and that there's scripts. There's still a script that no one has ever seen. The actual script for Jurassic Park 3, the original script that they built all the animatronics for, no one has ever seen.
Really?
And that script apparently is insane, like bonkers insane. And I just want to see that script, because That movie is a miracle that it even kind of works. Like, there's some really stupid stuff in that, but then there's some really cool stuff in that movie. And the fact that they took that, they had the animatronics and they have these sets built, and they go, well, we just threw the script out. All right, what do we do? And the fact that they even came up with anything kind of coherent is, I think, remarkable. But yes, those first 3 films do suffer from, it's the same problem the Star Wars films had. You set out a trilogy and you didn't build the roadmap, and that's the last 3 Star Wars films had a huge problem with that. I actually think it's funny to look at Jurassic World compared to those, because Colin had this plan as a 3 films from the get-go. Mm-hmm. I'm sure there were changes along the way in the writing process, but he had the end point. The end point was dinosaurs all over the world. That was the end point, and he made 2 movies to get us there, and hopefully when it's all done, it's gonna feel like a conclusive story. And I know he said that Maisie and Claire are going to be big, important in Dominion. So, I really hope, especially Maisie, because, the clone thing, I don't want that to just be forgotten. That is such a huge deal. And if they forget about it, it's going to cheapen that a lot. But I don't think they will. And from what the trailer suggests, that it seems like the Maisie clone element is going to be a big part still, which, because there's a line in the trailer where Owen says, we got to protect her. Yeah. And everybody on YouTube thinks that they're talking about Blue? Beta and Blue.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're talking about Maisie. I could be wrong, but I think that line is about Maisie.
I'm sure that
I don't know.
It must have. I'm sure she will play more as a motivation. You're right, rather than a plot point. I think in the end, her motivations were what released the dinosaurs to the mainland. But and so I think that taking actions to, I don't know, respect the rights of extinct animals will fall in she becomes a humanizing part where Malcolm maybe cannot say just let her die. It's an actual kid, right? For him to say, the dinosaurs should all die, let them go. They don't exist. They don't have their time here. Well, she's the same. If you can make the correlation that Maisie and the extinct dinosaurs have the same rights, have equal rights, or should be perceived the same way, then you should be able to let the dinosaurs die as equally and as heartfully or cheerfully as you let Maisie die. And if you can't let Maisie die, then you need to reconsider your stance on the dinosaurs. Ethically, anyhow. And I think Malcolm, if anything, is a high-level ethicist. Even though you should say you shouldn't do most things. You're all evil, but...
So that's I should say Malcolm is something.
So, we'll leave it on this. Do you think we'll get a Spinosaurus in the final film?
Oh, God. I was waiting for it. Oh, man, that's hard.
We're going to get a lot of weird stuff. And I think it's going to be exciting.
Yeah.
But do we get a Spinosaurus again? Because he was cool.
I think it's possible.
That Spinosaurus was really cool. That third film might have been a bit of a wonker, but that scene where he's digging the guys out of that flaming river was incredible. He was a good villain. Yeah. And they made him into the crocodile from Peter Pan with the ticking clock inside. They did some neat stuff with him.
Oh, no, yeah. The Spinosaurus is a wonderful design. And actually, originally, they had it scripted. It was going to show up in Fallen Kingdom.
Okay.
There's concept art when the volcano was exploding, when they were in the gyrosphere ball. Originally, the animal that got slammed in the face by a meteor was going to be the Spinosaurus. It was going to get the rock through the skull. And they cut it out because I guess they just thought it was too cheap. I don't know, but it makes me wonder because they cut that out. So, does that mean Colin wanted to maybe give the Spinosaurus a little bit better of a send-off than, this random death from rock? Or do they just not want to touch that with a 10-foot pole? I don't know what to expect. I'll tell you what, I'd say there's a better than none chance that it shows up. And I think if it does, I really want it to show up in a flashback with Biosyn. And maybe they're extracting DNA from it or something, because there's that fun fan theory that the Spinosaurus was more hybridized than some of the other animals, and that's why it's so aggressive, which I don't subscribe to because I just don't think it matters. But
the Indominus had the
if we find out it actually was.
The Indominus definitely had the Spinosaurus neck snapping strategy, didn't it?
Yes, it did. So, the old Jurassic Park. How we keep a movie PG-13, people? We have it. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
There's something horrifying. You've seen like a bulldog play with a chew toy, right? Where they shake their neck.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Oh, yeah.
you can immobilize prey with a strong neck. Like we know Tyrannosaurus has this incredible neck. There's a way to immobilize prey without this goofy neck snapping that is more horrifying and less bloody, but just and they don't do it. Instead, they do these little snap, and then and they get through. Well, we're just out
Jurassic
of
Park 3 had a couple of them.
Yeah, and the raptor just tweak. There you go.
Yeah,
we're done baiting the trap.
Yeah.
Tweak. They're a little goofy, in my opinion. Well,
it's goofy.
I wanted to still talk to you about Biosyn's old plan with Nedry. I wanted to talk to you more about Sattler's post-secondary education. I wanted to talk to you more about version 4.4, but we're short out of time. Would you come back and do it again?
Oh, absolutely. This was a blast. I'd love to come back. Those are all good things, too.
Those are going to be incredible things to get into. And I'll be later in the book with the podcast. It won't be spoiling things as bad. All right. Well, I'll keep you in line for that. It's going to be excellent. I'm so glad to have you on. And next time we get out east, I can't wait for round 2 at the Miramichi Community Center. It's going to be good times.
Oh, God.
Extraordinary thanks to my new friend, Justin Kiley, from the Missing Compys Podcast. What a terrific interview. I can't wait to have him back to talk more about the book. Our text for this week, there are 2 little parts. There's the second iteration and the shore of the inland sea, and that spans pages 29 to 42. With the introduction to the second iteration, or the second act, we have a quote from Ian Malcolm. It says, "With subsequent drawings of the fractal curve, sudden changes may appear." Whatever that means, we'll find out, I guess. Here's a synopsis of the chapter. Paleontologist Alan Grant is excavating the first complete skeleton of a baby carnivore in Snakewater, Montana, when he's visited by Bob Morris from the EPA, who has questions about the mysterious goings-on at InGen and the Hammond Foundation, which Grant may know something about. As Morris leaves, Grant receives a call asking to help identify some mysterious remains. Plot points. A visitor from the EPA comes to investigate John Hammond's connections. He raises a series of mysterious concerns about the Hammond Foundation, which Grant is intrigued by. Grant reveals what he knows about the Hammond Foundation, and Morris reveals what he knows about InGen. Grant receives a call from Alice Levin to help identify some mysterious remains that could be a rediscovered dinosaur. Which characters do we have? We have Alan Grant for the first time, professor of paleontology at the University of Denver, a foremost researcher in the field with little patience for academics or museum curators. He's a working class rancher, not an upper class bureaucrat. The bearded, barrel-chested, 40-year-old paleontologist is used to physical labor where weathering ungodly temperatures, aching knees, burning lungs, and dripping sweat are his everyday. And he has such laser-point focus, he can be oblivious to discomfort. His mind's eye or imagination is very strong. He can envision what others cannot see. Kind of guy who offers you a beer upon meeting you. He's working class, preferring tried and tested methodologies to new age strategies. For example, the Blackfoot-style 4-pole teepees. They're more spacious, comfortable, and resistant to wind than the fancy North Slope octahedral tents. Grant is very informal. He delivers his lectures in jeans and sneakers. They count days in the field in cases of beer. He puts his boots up on the table when he sits, he drinks beer during the day, and is uncomfortable with social niceties. He's kind of the anti-dinner party type. Grant calls his guest Mr. Morris, giving him a respectful title, even though he's not one for social niceties. And while he's known to not have patience for teacup dinosaur hunters, he demonstrates plenty of patience with Morris. Grant has met Hammond, he reveals. Grant apparently was paid a consultant's fee in connection with Isla Nublar. Though he's not one of the teacup dinosaur hunters, Grant has his pretensions, especially when he names his paper Juvenile Hyperspace, because he wanted to be, quote, as pretentious as possible, on page 41. Alan Grant is then credited with basically the career of Jack Horner, which we'll cover in the illusions section of this chapter. He's found lots of skeletal material, but had very little dietary data on juvenile hadrosaurs. Was offered $50,000 from InGen for all his data, and Grant got tired of Gennaro's late-night calls about hadrosaurs and called the agreement off on page 38, settling the consultancy fee at $12,000. We meet Ellie Sattler. We meet Ellie as Bob notices her, which is to say Grant is amused by Bob Morris, quote, gaping at her on page 33. She wears cut-off jeans and a work shirt tied at her midriff. She's 24 and darkly tanned, wearing her blonde hair pulled back. Quote, she's very good at what she does, says Grant. She's a paleobotanist and also does the standard field preps. And, quote, throwing her long neck back, she chugs a beer, while Morris stares on page 34. Let it be noted, she is not called a doctor at any point here. Let's keep an eye on that. The Environmental Protection Agency, known as the EPA, they're famous for causing the New York City Marshmallow Man incident in 1986. Today, they're represented by Bob Morris. Bob Morris, he has no evidence of Hammond's wrongdoing, but he feels it's, quote, clear John Hammond is evading the law, on page 39. He was assigned by the Office of Technology Transfer, or the OTT, which monitors shipments of American technology that may have military significance. He drives a blue Ford sedan, surely it's a rental. He's affiliated with the San Francisco office of the EPA. That's also the hometown of InGen. And he seems friendly and sociable. Gladly, eagerly accepts a beer while on a business trip, just after meeting someone. He's in his late 20s, and his tie, business suit, briefcase, and wingtip shoes put him out of place in the Badlands. He's surprised some dinosaurs were small on page 34. He's carrying sunglasses on page 41, and he is continually mentioned as keeping an eye on Sattler, which is referenced on page 35. And we're to read that because she's hot, and Bob's checking her out. Bob Morris, quote, primly brushes off his seat, which is mentioned right after Grant is revealed to have little patience for teacup dinosaur hunters. That said, Bob isn't a dinosaur hunter. He's come asking questions about the Hammond Foundation because it is mysterious, and Grant has accepted consultancy fees in association with Isla Nublar's, quote, nature preserve. When he starts asking Grant about money is when he starts recording their conversation on page 37. The Hammond Foundation. The first mention of the Hammond Foundation on page 35 is what funds Grant's expeditions, or at least the University of Denver's expeditions, $30,000 per year. A respected source of academic grants who fund research all over the world, including several dinosaur researchers like Bob Carey out of the Tyrrell in Alberta and John Weller in Alaska, and probably more. A rather, quote, mysterious organization, according to the EPA. It finances digs in Montana, Alaska, Canada, Sweden, all northern digs. Nothing below the 45th parallel. Nothing in Utah, Colorado, Mexico. Hammond Foundation only supports cold weather digs. Though, let's be clear, it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit to open this chapter. How much hotter can it get in Utah, Colorado, and Mexico? Well, I suppose a little bit, but you know what I'm saying? It's 100 degrees already. It's not really cold weather. InGen Inc., Farallon Road, Palo Alto, California is where it's located, and it operates the Isla Nublar Resort in association with the Hammond Foundation. It's paid Grant for consultancy fees, and Grant has not heard of InGen, just the Hammond Foundation. We hear about John Hammond, the man behind the John Hammond Foundation. He's reputed to support dinosaur digs because he's a, quote, dinosaur nut. Hammond is being investigated by the EPA. Grant has met Hammond and considers him a, quote, rich dinosaur enthusiast on page 38. Bob Morris believes it's clear that he's evading the law. Donald Gennaro. Grant doesn't recall talking to this guy very clearly. He's legal counsel for InGen, and Gennaro kept calling Grant for details about what to feed infant hadrosaurs at all hours of the night. It was suspicious. Gennaro said Hammond was planning a museum for children and wanted it to feature baby dinosaurs on page 38. He was hiring academic consultants, a paleontologist, which is Grant, a mathematician, a guy named Ian Malcolm, and other paleontologists, a couple of ecologists, and a systems analyst, who are going to imagine, I guess, are either John Arnold or Dennis Nedry. Probably Nedry. Ian Malcolm is mentioned. He's name-dropped as an academic consultant for InGen in Hammond's Isla Nublar Children's Museum. He's called a mathematician from Texas. And we have Lew Dodgson. Lew Dodgson is a geneticist responsible for the Biosyn rabies fiasco, which is told about on page 40. And Biosyn is still as reckless as ever. And other American companies are hurrying to set up facilities in foreign countries that lack sophistication about genetic engineering to be like any other high-tech development, and thus welcomed it to their lands unaware of the dangers they pose. Alice Levin returns. The lab tech at Columbia Medical Center has called Grant out in the field, interested in identifying some, quote, remains. We have some new localities. The modern Snakewater, Montana. The traditional lands of the Blackfoot First Nations, these badlands reach 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. Grant's team excavates on an eroded hillside beneath a big blue bowl of sky surrounded by blunted hills, exposed outcroppings of crumbling limestone without a shrub, tree, or anything but barren rock and whining wind. The sounds of a jackhammer and portable generator fill the dig site while kids work the scene. They have a trailer field lab and a series of teepees they sleep in. They've been excavating on this site since 1978. They've been on site for 63 cases of beer as they measure time in beer. They started in June with 100 cases, and now it's approximately August 28th by my calculations. And yes, I have a detailed, itemized timeline of events for the novel. Snakewater location is important because many babies and nesting sites are found here. Before, there were hardly any infant dinosaurs known, chiefly in the Gobi Desert. They found a dozen different hadrosaur nests, complete with eggs and infants. The trailer. The trailer is an air-conditioned trailer. It smells strongly of vinegar, with a series of long wood tables, tiny bone specimens neatly laid out, tagged and labeled, ceramic dishes and crocks for dissolving rock from bones, and Grant calls it, quote, his office, where there's a torn couch, a sagging chair, and a battered end table. There's Cretaceous Snakewater, Montana. That's 80 million years ago. The Cretaceous environment featured thin clouds, darkened by the smoke of nearby volcanoes. The atmosphere is denser, richer in carbon dioxide. Plants grow rapidly along the shoreline. No fish in the waters, but snails and clams. Pterosaurs swoop down to scoop algae from the surface, while carnivorous dinosaurs prowl the swampy shores of the lake among palm trees. Offshore is a small island, about 2 acres in size, ringed with dense vegetation, which serves as a protected sanctuary, where herds of hadrosaurs laid their communal nests and raised their young. And we get a mention for Isla Nublar. There's this island in Costa Rica, set up to be a supposed, quote, biological reserve that's mentioned on page 36. It's 100 miles offshore, very rugged, in an area of ocean where the combinations of wind and current make it almost perpetually covered in fog, called Cloud Island, or Isla Nublar is what that means in the local dialect. I think it's important that we mention some paleontology stuff. Grant works with a dental pick, an artist's camel brush, and paints exposed bone with rubber cement on page 31. Bits of bone flake away while he's brushing, so he pastes more rubber cement on it to protect it. And apparently his dig is funded for 2 years with $50,000 or $25,000 per season on page 37. He reveals that a baby dinosaur, at least a hadrosaur, reaches maturity in 3 years, give or take, on page 41. Is that accurate or true? Probably not, especially for gigantic multiple-ton megafauna like sauropods and tyrannosaurs, etc. Those probably took a good long while to reach their mature adult sizes, but I wager they did jump up a formidable size very quickly. I've read sauropods, the brachiosaurs, for example, could take like 30 years to get to the size of a building, while tyrannosaurs, perhaps 15 to 20 years to get as big as a bull African elephant. Montana State University, the home of Jack Horner and his Maiasaura research, says Maiasaura, and comparatively hadrosaurs, took about 8 years to reach adulthood, though may have become sexually mature within only 3 years. So no, this is fiction, but true to the novel, because our paleontologist set out the parameters for us. Would a real park be better, where it was overrun by a bunch of juvenile animals that were only about 2.5 years old? Probably not. Or would you like adult dinosaurs, but they're 30 years old, which means that the park was built back in the 1950s? Can you imagine a 1950s-style Jurassic Park with, white picket fences and milkmen and malt shops and a drive-in theater where dolls and dames were gee-whizzing for their dreamboats? Or perhaps we can just let the dinosaurs grow up quick and spare us both those scenarios and get on with the book, eh? Dinosaurs at Jurassic Park. So, knowing that Grant says dinosaurs can reach maturity within 3 years, that suggests that the animals at Jurassic Park can be full adults in no time. So, if the park begins construction in late 1986, according to Roberta Carter, who we've said isn't really a very reliable point of view character already, or early 1987 per Hammond, but he's also a dubious source of truth, I think we can reliably agree that Jurassic Park began construction, hypothetically, let's say, splitting the difference, on maybe January 1st, 1987. If they began cloning dinosaurs at that time too, and we take Grant's maturity calculations into consideration, as of August 1989, when this novel takes place, the earliest dinosaurs they've cloned will be 2.5 years old, nearing maturity. However, if we look elsewhere in the text, which requires some reading ahead, we are told on page 59 that Hammond begins his 2-year fundraising campaign in 1983, which would take us to 1985 when the fundraising campaign ends. And that is around the same time that Grant tells us in this chapter, on page 38, that he terminates his consultancy with InGen because it was becoming annoying. So it's reasonable to believe, therefore, that Hammond was already breeding dinosaurs, hadrosaurs anyhow, in 1985, and having Gennaro piss off Grant with late-night phone calls, which led Grant to terminate the contract. So in this case, the dinosaurs are now past 4 years old and can be completely mature. So there we go. With a bit of cross-referencing through the novel, and by accepting some dubious fictions around dinosaur growth rates, we can comfortably concede that all the dinosaurs are full adults in Jurassic Park. Asterisk. And yeah, I said asterisk because, and we'll tackle this later when we get to the tour on page 92 and begin to learn more about cloning dinosaurs. There are a bunch of problems that come up as we learn more details. Just put a pin in it for now, and I promise we'll cover it soon enough in like a whiny, overwhelming, problematic episode that probably runs way too long, but stay tuned for that. And if they were cloning dinosaurs before they began construction at the park, then where were they cloning them? Well, perhaps Site B, but hey, let's not expand the Jurassic Park universe prematurely. I think everything we need to know about this novel should come from within this novel. We'll leave Crichton's sequel, The Lost World, out of consideration for now. But it does suggest that there is a secondary site where the science was being conducted. Of course, proof of concept would be necessary before you lease a whole island and begin construction, right? So it stands to reason that there was a lab, probably in California, where the foundations of the cloning process were being tinkered with. The true Velociraptor. Velociraptor is known from the Campanian era of the late Cretaceous, exclusively from the Omnogovi Mongolia and the Jadokta Formation. If Grant got famous uncovering nesting sites for hadrosaurs based on the work of Jack Horner's Maiasaura papers, then he'd be in the Two Medicine Formation of Montana and southern Alberta. Coincidentally, very few carnivores are known from this formation. To this date, as far as I can tell, only the Bambi raptor is known from the Two Medicine Formation, a dromaeosaur, like Velociraptor, who's named after Bambi, the Disney character, in so much as it would have eaten things like Bambi. Two Medicine Formation has revealed species like centrosaurs, dromaeosaurs, pachyrhinosaurs, saurolophids, ankylosaurs, and ornithopods. The two which should catch our closest attention are Maiasaura, the nesting hadrosaurs, and Bambiraptor, the only known dromaeosaur or raptor from the region. The Two Medicine Formation is equivalent with the Dinosaur Park Formation in Alberta, where thyreophorans like ankylosaurs and nodosaurs, ceratopsians like chasmosaurs and centrosaurs, and the distantly related pachycephalosaurs, and hadrosaurs like critosaurs, lamiosaurs, parasaurolophids, and maniraptorans like oviraptorosaurs, truodontids, microraptors, ornithomimosaurs, and dromaeosaurs, and then the big Albertosaurus, which is a tyrannosaur. Those are all known from the Dinosaur Park Formation in Alberta. Canada wins that one. Allusions and references. One neat reference or allusion we have is Tyrrell and Carey. The Tyrrell in Alberta on page 35 refers to the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, Alberta, which is awesome. The researcher Bob Carey is a fictional paleontologist, but he may be a reference to a famous paleontologist who helped found the Tyrrell Museum, Phil Currie, more professionally known as Philip J. Currie, a Canadian paleontologist and museum curator. You think Bob Carey and Phil Currie sound enough alike to warrant that it's an illusion? In Phil Currie's bio on Wikipedia, Phil Currie is credited as one of the models for Alan Grant for the film Jurassic Park. And growing up, Phil Currie, to me, was a talking head in all the dinosaur documentaries that I ever watched. He's one of the rock stars of paleontology in the 1990s, and probably a whole lot more than that, too. John Weller in Alaska may be a reference to the University of Alaska Museum, but I can't find a, quote, John Weller that serves as quite the right analog for this reference. My best guess is Roland A. Gangloff, who's considered the, quote, godfather of paleontology in the 1980s in Alaska, although his name isn't quite analogous with John Weller, especially after the Phil Currie coincidence. There is a David Norton, who co-authored some of Gangloff's papers, that sort of has a John Weller ring to it. Dave Norton, John Weller. But I'm not convinced Dave Norton had the paleontological career to catch Crichton's attention for a casual allusion. Phil Currie, on the other hand, would have been a slam dunk. And of course we have Jack Horner. Grant is said to have found a clutch of dinosaur eggs in Montana in 1979, which he wound up publishing on in 1983, which includes tens of thousands of hadrosaurs nesting along the shore of a vast inland sea, building a communal living nest of eggs in the mud, raising their infant dinosaurs in the herd, and it made Grant a celebrity overnight, we're told on page 37. Jack Horner published in 1979 the paper Nests of Juveniles Provides Evidence of Family Structure Among Dinosaurs, which I mentioned earlier in the episode. This introduced, quote, the discovery of 15 1-meter-long hadrosaurian skeletons together in a nest-like structure, and he argued it offered, quote, the first tangible evidence of the social behavior of at least one group of dinosaurs. They were discovered by Marion Brandfold in terrestrial sediments of the Two Medicine Formation near Chateau, Tenton County, Montana. Obviously, Grant's work in Montana and the subsequent mention of the nearby Chateau are direct allusions to the work performed by Jack Horner. Horner's discoveries and publishing on the Maiasaura, and especially on juveniles and babies, revealed that dinosaurs changed shape as they grew into their mature bodies, and therefore, throughout their lives, their bodies were different shapes. Infants weren't just miniature replicas of adults. They grew and changed shape as they matured. It meant, in Horner's perspective, that potentially many of the dinosaur discoveries could be juvenile forms of already known adult species. This was especially a concern among three primary groups: pachycephalosaurs, ceratopsians, and tyrannosaurs. Perhaps many of the genera that have been named were in fact not distinct species, but just juvenile members of a common species, which change shape as they grow into their mature forms. For an example, in the Maiasaura paper, he had mentioned that Brachyceratops might have been just a juvenile form of Monoclonius. Consider that the large neck frills and the big skulls and all the ornaments surrounding their skulls may have taken on different morphs as a subject matured. And so Horner, actually today, you can go find it, has an excellent TED Talk that you can look up that kind of argues maybe small tyrannosaurids are just juvenile tyrannosaurs and not a distinct species like Nanotyrannus. At the same time, Stygimoloch, Pachycephalosaurus, and then all kinds of different things are being argued about in terms of ceratopsians. We just had in a recent episode a discussion about Torosaurs and Triceratops. Are they distinct species or just juvenile/mature forms of the same thing? All kinds of different ideas have emerged from this discovery of juveniles that began with Jack Horner's work. Stylistic techniques. I mentioned this early, that there's a typo. And if you've got the right copy of the book, you can find it on page 35. It reads, quote, "Grant watched as Morris primly brushed off the seat of a chair before he sat down. Morris opened his briefcase, rummaged through his papers, and glanced at Ellie, who was lifting bones with tweezers from the acid bath at the other end of the trailer." Was. Nice. Anyhow, that's been fixed in subsequent printings, but if you've got an old enough copy, was on page 35 is still there. Pacing. The backstory and daydreaming of Grant is interrupted by Ellie calling him, making it feel like the pacing is moving very quickly. There's a simile, no thicker than his little finger, which demonstrates a fossil's shape and size. We have a metaphor. It says, a big blue bowl of sky. A big blue bowl of sky is how he describes the sky. And perhaps that sounds a little dumb. It might sound better if he said it was like a dome or an upside down bowl. Maybe that the Badlands are rising up on all sides like a big bowl. Not sure why blue bowl of sky is quite fitting. Another metaphor here is he saw the kids working around the jackhammer, and that refers perhaps to students, or at least young adults, probably old enough to have a beer, right? So they might be 21, helping at the site. So they're not actual kids. That'd be a metaphor. They just call them the kids. And they do that a lot. Another metaphor here is teacup dinosaur hunters, or what Alan Grant refers to as the upper-class paleontologist, supposedly because they might enjoy high society, like dinner parties, academia, bureaucracy, etc., whereas he fervently prefers the out-of-doors. He's, quote, working class. Does this expression make the connection as strongly as it could? Perhaps not. It sounds more like they're pansies, who like the teacup ride at Disneyland, who can't handle the big rides, rather than the hoity-toity society with their raised pinky fingers, as perhaps Grant is suggesting. I don't know if I like that metaphor either. And it ends in a cliffhanger. The chapter ends on another terrific cliffhanger as the mysterious MacGuffin's remains make their way to Grant's attention. The meddlesome Alice Levin has snatched the specimen against Dr. Stone's wishes and faxed an x-ray to Grant. Pretty neat. And I have one little comment about the dialogue, and it's about Columbo. I love Columbo. They came to the door of the trailer, and Grant opened it and felt the hot air from outside, and Morris paused to put on his sunglasses, just like Columbo would always pause at the doorway. And he turned, and he goes, "One last thing," said Morris. "Suppose Injun wasn't really making a museum exhibit. Is there anything else they could have done with the information in the report you gave them?" Grant laughed. "Sure, they could feed a baby hadrosaur." Morris laughed too. "A baby hadrosaur. That'd be something to see. How big were they?" "Oh, about so," said Grant, holding his hands 6 inches apart, squirrel size. "And how long before they become full grown?" "Oh, 3 years," Grant said, give or take. Morris held out his hand. Can you picture Columbo taking his hand just off the top of his forehead? Morris held out his hand, and I just see Columbo doing that. "Well, thanks again for your help." This is verbatim Columbo dialogue. He's figured out the puzzle. Columbo knows all he needs to know, and can now go forward setting the trap to capture Hammond. And Grant has cracked the case. Hammond is breeding dinosaurs. He's got it figured out. This is classic Columbo form. When Grant asks what Ellie thinks, she shrugs and says, "Naive," which is exactly what Columbo would have his subjects assume of him. So is Morris naive? Is he not as stupid as he's letting on? Just like Columbo? Grant is especially skeptical that Morris is painting Hammond as the evil arch-villain and finds it laughable. Well, that said, I still prefer my Columbo analog in Jurassic Park to be Alan Grant, not Bob Morris, but the dialogue in this moment is too irresistible to overlook. Some more motifs in this chapter here that continue on. We have more story. It talks about responsibility and safety. InGen is obviously setting up one of the most powerful genetic engineering facilities in the world in an obscure Central American country with no regulations, on page 38. Without regulations, harm can be done, as evidenced in Morris's anecdote about Biosyn, another evil genetics company. Here, the Biosyn rabies case on page 40 reveals that in 1985, Genetic Biosyn Corporation of Cupertino tested a bioengineered rabies vaccine on a farm in Chile without informing the government or the farm workers involved. It's read as unethical and extraordinarily dangerous and outrageous and irresponsible and criminally negligent. So there's that motif of responsibility and safety re-emerging. Some further discussion on some of the things that came up with the portrayal of women. Sattler is barely introduced and is given this very James Bond-esque introduction, with her being, quote, very good at what she does, as if there was like wordplay and some connotation to be read into it. Oh, and what is it that she's very good at? Literally, that's the next question. This repartee, as if there were an intended pause to let your imagination wander briefly, to raise an eyebrow, to enter into that flirtatious jousting of wordplay. But without saying anything sexual about her, she's heavily coded into sexuality, and the male gaze is strongly written all over her. Bob Morris gapes on page 33 and stares on page 34 at her. She wears cut-off jeans and a shirt tied at her midriff, darkly tanned, blonde hair with a long neck while she drinks. And she doesn't get to do much. She barely has a thing to say beyond answering Grant's phone calls while he's in a meeting. How do you like that? Chapter titles. The shore of the inland sea entitles this chapter, and that environment is described on page 32 as 80 million years ago as a warm, swampy bayou. The sea is 1,000 miles wide, spanning from the Rocky Mountains to the Appalachians, by today's geography. I don't know how to pronounce that word. I don't know what to be said about having a bunch of newfies, expat Brits, people from Louisiana, Southerners, Yanks. Everybody's got their own way to pronounce Appalachia or whatever. I don't know. So if somebody has a definitive answer, let me know. The entire American West was underwater nonetheless. We have some more ecological criticism that kind of emerges, more evidence to include in our collection of things to reference when we go to do our ecological criticism later on. The Environmental Protection Agency has some questions for Alan Grant, and Grant says he knew that paleontology, the study of extinct life, had in recent years taken on an unexpected relevance to the modern world. The modern world was changing fast, and urgent questions about the weather, deforestation, global warming, or the ozone layer often seemed answerable, at least in part, with information from the past, information that paleontologists could provide. He had been called as an expert witness twice in the past few years, we're told on page 32 and 33. So there we go. That's interesting. Don't know if there's much to be said here, but it's certainly, in terms of Alan Grant, there's working class versus upper class. I used to think Grant was, a case in old school versus new school, but it's not quite accurate. The dichotomy is closer to the working class versus the upper class. The dig site uses teepees, incorporating solutions the Utes embrace to survive in the Badlands, versus North Slope octahedral tents, the most advanced available. I think that's very interesting. Grant has little patience for, quote, the academics, for the museum curators, for what he called teacup dinosaur hunters, and it took some pains to distance himself in dress and behavior from them. He tells us on page 34. He even delivers his lectures in jeans and sneakers. In terms of our due diligence, the MacGuffin continues moving along, identifying the green lizard's remains, and now its X-ray continue to carry the narrative forward, and the mystery thickens as a result. Now it's possibly a procompsognathus triassicus, though they'll want to review the specimen for certain, and hint, it is a procompsognathus. And finally, we're getting closer to positively identifying this lizard. In terms of building a mystery, we're not just stuck on what this little lizard is anymore. Now we've got the Hammond Foundation. We've got the mysterious entity that's working on the island that we need to learn more about. Tying the mysterious creature from earlier to dinosaurs, we have Bob Morris conspicuously noticing that the dinosaur bones look like chicken bones. They're very bird-like, states Sattler. The reject pile of bones too fragmentary to use are sent for genetic testing, which Bob Morris conspicuously mentions and repeats. Genetic testing? The fossils are sent to a lab called Medical Biological Services in Salt Lake that grinds them up and tries to extract proteins, which are identified and reported back. There's no known association with the Hammond Foundation, though. These both, in immediately consecutive paragraphs, are to pique our ears, alerting us that, hey, the strange monster from earlier was bird-like, and it had markers in its salivary enzymes that were for genetic engineering, remember, from only 8 pages ago? The Hammond Foundation only supports cold weather digs, which is strange because some of the best researchers are working on hot climates. And the relationship between dinosaurs to amber, Hammond has purchased large quantities of amber from America, Europe, and Asia, including many pieces of museum-quality jewelry. $17 million spent on it, and now possesses the largest privately held stock of this material in the world. Amber is easily synthesized and has no commercial or defense value. There's no reason to stockpile it. And defense value suggests a military utility, which sort of comes up again and again in this chapter in all of this confusion. Bob Moore says he was assigned by the Office of Technology Transfer, which monitors shipments of American technology that may have military significance. They've identified 2 areas of possible illegal technology transfer. And 1, 3 very powerful Cray XMP supercomputers were sent to Costa Rica, and 2, 24 hoods, automated gene sequencers, which work out genetic code by themselves, which are too modern to yet be on the restricted list. InGen is obviously setting up one of the most powerful genetic engineering facilities in the world in an obscure Central American country with no regulations, is what we're told. Plus, there's this island in Costa Rica set up as a supposed, quote, biological reserve. It's 100 miles offshore, very rugged, in an area of ocean where the combinations of wind and current make it almost perpetually covered in fog, called Cloud Island, or Isla Nublar. Isla Nublar. In fact, the Costa Ricans were amazed that anybody would want it, says Morris. It's clear this rich benefactor is, quote, evading the law, says Morris. So lots and lots of mystery still to unpack with all of this. Well, I hope you've liked our deep dive into this particularly interesting chapter that launches into Act 2 of our novel. And I hope, too, that my terrific guest, Justin Kiley, was able to provide some better insights into all of this. He changed my perspective on the modern franchise Jurassic World in a meaningful way. Incredible thanks to what a special guest, Justin Kiley, who's dedicated so much time to the Jurassic Park franchise and to the Jurassic Park novel himself. Really, really wonderful to have somebody with so much attention on this intellectual property to share his thoughts with us. So it's really greatly appreciated. Thank you. I want to sign off today by also thanking you for joining me. If you want to read along in the book, add some thoughts to what we've been discussing on the show, or be a guest on the show and chat with me about anything that you like about Jurassic Park, you can do that by connecting with me. I'm at ryansrogers@gmail.com. And if you'd like to be a guest, it could be you! Drop me a line and we can try and set something up. We can rehash, tear down, gush over, and chit-chat about any part of the book, or also not the book, all you'd like. The Jurassic Park-Cast is part of the Spring Chickens banner of amateur intellectual properties, including the Spring Chickens Funny Pages, Tomb of the Undead graphic novel, the Second Lapse graphic novelettes, The Infantry, and the worst of them all, the King Street Capers. You can find links to all of that baggage in the show notes or by visiting the schickens.blogspot.ca, or finding us on Facebook at facebook.com/springchickencapers. Or me, I'm on Twitter at RogersRyan22. Thank you dearly for tuning in to the Jurassic Park-Cast. Jurassic Park Podcast, where we talk about the novel Jurassic Park, and also not that too. Until next time.